Hello everyone, welcome to an analysis of dance where we discuss the movements and debuts of the Billboard dance charts in immaculate detail with in-depth reviews of each debut each week. Well, at least me changing over to the new style formatting after the split encouraged some interesting conversation around other charts besides Hot Dance, because on a week like this, it was absolutely needed. I mean, I'm not saying quiet weeks are a bad thing. Right now I'm going through an intensely busy period in my life with regards to work and other stuff I don't really feel like talking about. So for me, having a quieter week is welcome from time to time, but on this case I do like talking about a lot more debuts than just one, which Hot Dance only had a single debut and Dance Pop had literally nothing unique. Lovely. And speaking of which, yeah, Hot Dance was quiet as all hell and didn't really have a ton to really talk about, although considering the quality of the stuff that's sticking around and the fact that Haven could be coming back next week with I Run, I'm not expecting it to really slow down anytime soon, and I honestly can't complain that much. I mean, right now it looks like No Broke Boys by Disco Lines and Tinashe is just holding an iron grip at #1, as even though it's losing radio pretty fast as they're dumping it, it does have really good streaming behind it, and it's just really strong, managing to hold out against Christmas pretty well. I mean, unfortunately it's going to get caught between years on the Hot 100, but for the time being, it's here, and I can't really complain that much. But what's more interesting is whether Dracula by Tame Impala at #2 can make a run back for the top, as while it's losing streaming pretty considerably, it is gaining radio, and at the rate it's going, it might slowly rise up and beat past the recurrent rules, which I would absolutely not complain about. The song's great, and both of these top two are well overdue after last year. Really nice to see them both here. And man, it's just nice that they both hold back Let the World Burn by Chris Gray, Rebel, and Cried at #3, where it looks like this unfortunately has the merits of good streaming, although it is starting to lose out. And even if it did survive in the bubbling under despite a massive Summer Walker album bomb that pretty much just bulldozed through there, it doesn't have any signs of rebounding. Thank God for that. Still puts it above the Day's Notion remix by Crystal at #4, where it looks like the streaming is just not letting go of this at all, although it's in a bit of a precarious situation, because while I can see I Run overtaking it next week when it comes back, it's going to be close to borderline of being knocked off the charts entirely, thanks to the 52-week rule and it being close to exiting the top 5 as is. I mean, I really like the song, but it's stuck around way longer than I think anyone expected. But for now, it at least overtook My Old Ways by Tame Impala at #5, which even despite decent streaming, it's starting to fall back considerably, as you'd expect from a non-single from this album, and also the fact that really the entire album is actually sticking around decently well across the board, that's at least really reassuring for me. Hell, I could say the same about Fred Again's re-release of USB, as Victory Lap with Skepta and Pluck Boy Max is at #6. Not the last time we'll be talking about him here in terms of jumps, and really, it's just cool to see him finally get some staying power this long into the rollouts. Really proves that the quality is there to back it up. But what honestly surprised me a lot more was Crystallized by John Summit featuring Inez jumping up to #7, and yes, it really does suck that a mediocre at best remix was actually able to do it, but as one of the few people left who actually defends this song considerably, I'm not going to complain about sticking around. It's probably going to end up losing out soon, but the fact that it's stuck around the top 10 for another week is really cool, especially when the alternative is a new arrival to the top 10 and the first of 2 songs in a row by this artist despite being thoroughly mediocre at best, Desire by Ian Asher and Ollie Alexander at #8. As if we needed this awfully bad remix by someone whose skills in production are questionable at best and who ruins an otherwise really good original song from Ollie Alexander. Yeah, this does not deserve to be here at all. And on that note, Blackout Day Stay Away by Ian Asher and Fantagram at #9. Again, why are we doing this? Can we please move on? The guy's complete lack of talent and production is really starting to show through. There's a reason why his other remixes haven't charted yet. And on the topic of artists with no talent, once again Rugada by Stay False, Cape and Jandro at #10. Thank God that the scene is starting to lose out considerably, including some other stuff that we'll talk about a little bit later on, because seriously, this has no reason still being here, and if we want to talk about problematic scenes, this is by far the worst case of it. Hell, it's already telling that in our fall-offs, we actually lost another Brazilian funk song as Lua na Praca by all those DJs that are barely talented enough to even justify justify talking about, it's gone after doing next to nothing on the charts. Thank God for that. As for our falls, well, okay, we did see the continued fall of No Reply by Tame Impala to 23, but the most notable cases came in our big debuts from last week that just didn't have much staying power at all. I mean, I called Tsunami by DJ Snake featuring Future and Travis Scott utterly flopping to 15. I expect this to probably end up being gone next week at how bad it's doing on streaming right now. But what surprised me was Beto's Horns, Fred remixed by Fred Again and Catriel and Paco Amoroso down to 22 off the debut last week. More so the fact that this actually survived a second week, and when we get to more Fred Again later on, it's proving that these later singles are actually doing really well. Hell, we're already starting to see that in our jumps and comebacks, as while we did see the unnecessary comeback of Kisses by Bless and Cameron Watson featuring BB Close clawing back to 25. I mean, seriously, this song should have been victims of the recurrent rules as it hit 20 weeks and is outside of the top 25, but I mean, I like the song and I can't really complain about it being back, but seriously, Billboard, at least on this genre chart, follow your recurrency rules as much as you don't do so on the Hot 100, please. But the real big story in our jumps, yep, Talk of the Town by Fred Again, Sammy Virgie, and Reggie is up to number 18. This is really interesting because it's really a sign that even despite losing a full tracking week and being released midway through a couple of weeks back, this song's actually getting enough upwards momentum where I can see it becoming a legitimate hit. It's already charting in the UK and Australia right now, and for Sammy Virgie especially, with this being his potential first year-end hit song on Hot Dance, that's incredibly cool to see. Really long overdue, even if I wish it was something from Same Day Cleaning. Oh, and also some Brazilian funk songs that only really benefited from songs falling above them. And in the case of No Batidão by Zakai and Slaughter at number 12, it's already losing out worldwide. I don't expect it to gain that much more. Oh, and also Montegam Zornada by Mozzie, DJ Samir, and DJ Harvey 26 is back up to 17 because, again, high debuts from last week didn't really have much in the way of staying power, and unfortunately this song is actually pretty stable. As much as it's starting to lose out on streaming and has already peaked worldwide, I expect this to last a little bit longer. Yay. But what's more interesting comes in what debuted this week, and it's a utterly bizarre song, being number 16, Fever by Buckshot and fakemink.
I'm fluffy like a bunny, blood on my Da Vinci teeth, no one's running. I'm with Buckshot, summertime driving, hot outside so we gotta keep the top off. Up now but you know I still bust shots, high grade till I wait and the cops up.
Seeing the insane responses and hype to this song just made me really get caught off guard when I first saw them. I'll admit to not really having my ear on the ground when it comes to this particular scene. I mean, I was already quite surprised when Sleepwalker actually charted and stuck around last year, but when I saw that this song charted with two names that really caught me off guard, Buckshot being an Irish rapper associated with the SoundCloud movement as well as hyperpop, and fakemink being a UK producer and singer who once again is another name that is associated with the SoundCloud scene. Okay, I was just completely caught off guard by this even charting at all. And this... okay, look, I have a ton of respect for this, and the fact that it's actually charting and potentially able to do well, it's really cool, but as a song on its own, I'm not as huge on it. Part of it is my hesitancy towards this sort of production style as is, where the percussion and vocals just overpower the whole mix and smother out any sort of bass or melody to speak of. And I get that it's meant to sound very intentionally homespun and amateurish, but for me it just doesn't really hit the same way as a lot of other songs in this scene do. And while I can give some delivery to Buckshot for delivering a really gruff vocal style that actually works well over this beat, he's got a ton of presence and personality where I can absolutely see why people like him. It was unfortunately matched out by fakemink sounding completely disinterested and delivering a really mediocre hook that I wasn't huge on, even if I can understand why he's here, and the chemistry between the two is rock solid. It's by far the best part of the track. So yeah, look, as it is, I do expect that this will grow on me. It's got the same level of ridiculousness as something like The Spark by Cabin Crew, which did also grow on me, but for me, right now, I'm not hugely on board with it. It's perfectly fine. I can see the appeal and why people are actually really hyped about this charting at all, but for now, not huge on it, at least not yet. And hey look, Dance Pop also had a debut. I mean, it's not exactly a unique one, and really everything else about that chart right now is boring as fuck, but for me, I'll at least take it, alongside stuff like, say, How It's Done by Huntress Huntrix at number 1, and Midnight Sun by Zara Larsson surging up to 11, where it's actually overtaking Crush despite the fact that it has absolutely no radio to speak of. Really interesting. It looks like streaming's on board with it. That's a good sign. And then there's also that debut that's worth noting here, Dopamine by Robin at 14. Yes, it somehow actually managed to chart on the main charts. I don't expect it will last considering that Robin's staying power has not been that strong over the years, but at least it's cool to see her here with a really good song and a good comeback. Yeah, I'm on board with this. But really, that same lack of interest translates over the dance room because literally nothing happened here of note. I mean, How It's Done by Huntrix is number 1 here too, and the only song that gained any considerable momentum is Don't Stop the Music by Rihanna, surging up to number 9, where it looks like the virality from Breaking Dishes translated to other songs on the album. I can't complain, Don't Stop the Music is a really damn good song. But then Dance House came in, and man, this was an insane week with 4 debuts, all of which are house leading in some regard, and don't give me a whole lot to say. Lovely. Well, okay, somehow Takedown by Huntrix managed to take back number 1 again. I really do not get why this is continuing to get better self-support than the other K-pop Demon Hunter song on this chart right now, but I mean, it's not terrible. And besides that, the only notable move is, well, the Dead Dance by Lady Gaga falling to 13. Maybe a sign that trying to replicate the same level of hype behind a viral moment that you had with Wednesday, especially with a really mediocre at best song in one of Gaga's worst tracks to date, that's maybe not a good sign, and maybe a sign that you should actually try a little bit harder next time. But okay, those 4 debuts, starting off surprisingly with number 14, I Cannot by Anti-Up. So okay, given that these are all tech house leaning tracks, my opinions on these are not exactly going to be the most really detailed or interesting to talk about. Although in this case, it's at least interesting because I've not expected anything from the Anti-Up alias to actually chart here, especially when said alias doesn't credit both big names within it being Chris Lake and Chris Lorenzo. This is their first charting song here in a long time, if not ever. And this, honestly, yeah, really solid. It lives up to the potential of at least one of the names in this alias. I like the sample of Awesome 3 that gives the song a lot more melody than you'd expect, especially against those really gritty synth production styles that I actually found really impressive. And when the drops have a much nastier synth lead and a much heavier percussion style, it honestly proves that Chris Lake can absolutely nail this sort of atmosphere in his sleep. And with him here, Chris Lorenzo pushes outside of his often boring comfort zone with actual passages that are calm and some ambient sections. It's actually well paced, unlike a lot of other tech house songs that chart here. So yeah, pretty damn good. Honestly, really excited to see if this leads to more Anti-Up material charting because, yeah, they're operating on a really high level of quality. Really good stuff. Number 11, Be Without You by SOSA.
I've never, ever heard of this feeling. My heart, it pounds for you and me. Don't want, just can't be without you, baby.
More on the darker side with UK producer SOSA, who delivers a much heavier and more driving house beat than I expected, with an old school vibe alongside those trance-esque synths and the acidic touches that honestly makes this sound a lot more unique than you'd expect coming out of a dance sales filler entry like this. I mean, it's a little bit repetitive in its melodies, but the addition of the vocal samples really does add a lot to make this really distinct and memorable, and I can absolutely see this thing going off in a club setting, especially in a more futuristic clubs where there's lights and lasers galore. Yes, I've painted that image in your head. I really would like to be there myself. Really damn good too. I like the atmosphere, and I think overall it's just a much better produced song than a lot of the other debuts here this week. Yeah, this is probably the best of the songs that I've charted this week. Number 7, Feels Like Us by Devault. Admittedly, I was a lot less excited for this given the experts only cosign because man, that label has been going downhill this past year. I'd argue outside John Summit it's been delivering more misses than hits recently, but honestly I think I might like this more than any other non-John Summit related experts only release that I've covered here recently. This is actually pretty solid. The poppier touches with the female vocals and the legitimate hook that creates some really nice atmosphere, and that intense bass heavy tech house beat that honestly is a lot more restrained than I expected and gives a lot lot more rooms to the vocals. Reminds me heavily of John Summit's best material this year, and that's a huge compliment. Yeah, absolutely slaps and has a lot more atmosphere than you'd expect coming out of this particular label. This really works for me too. Really good song. Number 6, coming up, it's There by OMNOM and OMNOM as HYPERBEAM. Okay, look, the fact that OMNOM's actually getting more and more crossovers here after Won't Be Possible, that's at least really exciting for me. And given that I really liked the last HYPERBEAM single that charted here, I was really looking forward to this one. And man, if you want to talk about one of the most disappointing releases of the year, it is this. I mean, I understand that Gorillaz nostalgia has been a thing for a couple of years now, but seriously, did anyone really ask for you to remix Dare, one of their biggest songs and also one of my personal favorites from them? Really? And man, when you boost up the tempo and make it a lot more focused around that really repetitive refrain of the hook, it really does not work in the same way for me, especially when you remove Sean Ryder's lower vocal tone that actually plays well off of Damon Albarn's higher singing, and my god, this just does not work at all. And that's a shame, because if you take that out, you've got a perfectly okay beat with a lot of wild sections and proof that OMNOM once again has some fantastic production instincts. This could have really worked for me if it was an instrumental. But with the sample being integrated so awfully from this, it drags it down to being mediocre at best, and one of the biggest disappointments of the year for me. And knowing that this has got a dance airplay push behind it for OMNOM, who absolutely deserves better representation than this, yeah, inexcusable. This kind of really sucks. Skip it. But anyways, moving on from that to another welcome busy area, Mediabase dance airplay, and man, a lot happened here again. Hell, we even got that number one that I called last week, Forever by Millennium, Tom Grennan and Alna, which again is another case of a song that underperformed considerably on the main charts, but it looks like because of the industry backing, it's going to stick around. It's probably the weakest of the singles that I've heard from the album so far, but it being decent is a good sign of Odyssey coming forward. Let's hope that other songs get pushed, or let's say To the Moon actually gets pushed properly this time. But hey, for now it did get the edge over Ocean by Calvin Harris and Jesse Reyes in number 2, which didn't really fall as hard as I think anyone expected, and considering that Calvin Harris is a radio darling, I don't expect it will go out much quicker than it currently is anyways. Nice. But then that takes us to Nobody Make Me Feel by Oscar Medkay featuring Khalid at number 3, where it looks like in this one's case, it's probably going to end up hitting that number 1 spot next week, which especially for Oscar Medkay, that's a really promising way to start off, and I really hope more from him actually gets pushed. He's delivered some really quality singles since this song first charted, and those deserve a lot of attention as well. And on the note of presence, Bunt's 2 songs in the top 10 are back next to each other, with Crazy with Miles Lloyd at number 4, which is getting a little bit slower, and I don't expect it will hit the top as quickly as the other song, Spaces with the Chainsmokers and Izzy Bissell at number 5. This one's getting a little bit more momentum on spins, and while it does have a little way to go in terms of its gap to actually make a run past Crazy, it's looking like it's going to get there. That's at least welcome for me. It's the better song. And that's also factoring in Yes Baby by Madison Beer at number 6, which is showing absolutely no signs of slowing down, even despite not being pushed to pop airplay. Interesting there. I thought it would get a little bit more attention in that regard. But then that takes us to 3 new songs in the top 10. Unfortunately, starting off with by far the worst one, Cry For You 2025 by Side Piece. I mean, I called it a hit because it's obvious crappy nostalgia bait, but did we really need to get this to actually stick around? Really, there's considerably better songs even from Side Piece that deserve this more. Thankfully though, it looks like it's going to get overtaken by Set Me Free by Armin van Buuren and Thatcher at number 8, even if in both songs' case they have the potential to actually get caught between years. And in Set Me Free's case, it's really unfortunate because man, this deserved a lot better in terms of its position and run. I really hope it sneaks in the last minute. Although thankfully the last entry here is definitely not going to get caught between years, and I I am thrilled that's the case, because it's What If It Takes You Away by Will Sass featuring Oaks at number 9. Yes, it looks like this guy's actually having some staying power for a relatively new name, and considering that the quality's absolutely been there in the 3 charting songs that he's had this year, I really hope this guy sticks around going into 2026. He's got a ton of potential and he's really lived up to a lot of it, and considering that this also might be a hit alongside Into the Blue, yeah, he's been one of the bright spots of the year. No complaints at all. Oh, and finally, we've got Superpowers by Telly Carsten Oaks yet again at number 10. Man, she seems like the go-to vocalist of a lot of dance music at the moment. I can't really complain. She's got a great voice. But man, if you want some big stories here, look at our fall-offs where we saw a big chunk of year-end contenders fall off from the jump. Tesla by Mal P, Our Time by Afrojack, Martin Garrix, David Guetta, and Amel, Falling by Chris Lake and Bonobo featuring Alexis Roberts, and thankfully, by far the biggest one, No Broke Boys by Disco Lines and Tinashe, which with the spins it's got will probably end up being the biggest dance radio hit of the entire year. I mean, it's pretty obvious when the song is crossing over to pop radio considerably for a DJ, let alone one that's got a song as immensely catchy as this. I'm not remotely surprised, and I'm not going to complain either, unlike a lot of other people probably will. Oh, also Golden by Huntrix is gone too, but considering how successful it was on the Hot 100, I don't think they remotely care at this point. It is what it is. But where things should be considered comes in our falls, where the majority of them were top 10 songs from last week. The only exception is Hotter by Shermanology and Green Velvet at 22, a song that I'm amazed has stuck around as long as it has and might make the year-end list at its rate, which is great. It's one of the best Afro House hits of the year. But besides Superpowers in the top 10, we had Crushed by Zara Larsson at 15 and Too Late by Shanks at 18. Both really decent songs at best, and while I don't think I'm as huge on them as some other people possibly will be, they're both easily going to make the year-end list, and especially in Shank's case, that's really cool for a debut. I hope more comes along that's considerably better. But unfortunately, that enthusiasm doesn't translate over to our 2 comebacks this week, with Tears by Sabrina Carpenter at 50, which I expect will be gone soon considering it's collapsing on pop airplay right now. And same deal with All Night by Lucy at 49, although this one is only really here to fill in space. It's still losing spins and I expect it will be gone again next week. Thank God for that. But our jumps were honestly kind of surreal in a lot of ways. Yes, you had your obvious jumps off the debut like Sugar 2025 by Robin Schulz featuring Francesco Yates at 41, or Dancer by Cascade up to 34. Again, this guy's got staying power. I'm not surprised that any single he charts with is actually going to end up sticking around. But along with those, we saw the massive surge for I Run by Haven, now featuring Caitlin Aragon, surging up to 23. And it looks like the streaming numbers behind this are so absolutely monumental that people missed it enough to actually restream it and potentially get it to chart in the top 5 of Hot Dance again. I mean, look, I'm not going to complain too much considering that I've always liked this song, and with the moral dilemma out of the way, considering that Caitlin Aragon is an actual credited vocalist, it doesn't really disappoint me that this is actually gaining momentum, especially considering how intensely catchy it is. I can see this having a really good run on this charts if the novelty of the fact that it wasn't available for a couple of days, it doesn't wear off as much as I really think it could potentially do so. And on the topic of surprises, outside of Set Me Free in the top 10, we had some pretty considerable gains that are showing some really big hits that might get caught between years but have the potential to stick into 2026. Like Phases by Joel Corey and Abby Flynn at 19, or especially Don't Blame Me by James Carter at 25. Seriously, this is gaining this much momentum so quickly. And then there's Human by Gil Glaze at 30, Dreaming Season by Elefante and EXO, and unfortunately up to 39. And most bizarrely, for the second week in a row against all my expectations, You Got Me Feeling by Parcels is up to 26. Yes, this actually is on track to becoming a legitimate hit on dance radio. I think that's one of the biggest surprises of the whole year, and considering how great the track is, that's a welcome surprise in my eyes. Hell, once you get over to Billboard, it's actually there at 39. The first time that Parcels has ever charted on a main chart, and considering that the song's not showing any signs of slowing down, that's a really reassuring sign this might actually stick around. Oh, and on the topic of the other debuts, Human by Gil Glaze at 37, Dancer by Cascade already being there at 36, alongside The Light That Leads Me by Netsky featuring BB Rexa at 34, and also some lesser cuts like Hello by Sagala Lee and Janita Gandhi at 33, and and Don't Blame Me by James Carter 32. It's already looking like it's going to outperform 2 days, and really I'm not sure how I feel about that. And on Mediabase, well, yeah, all of the debuts are unique here. So let's start off this complete mess of a week with number 48, Skin and Bones by Shab.
In the solution, oh, changing, keep put me in tune, and I'm dancing to it, come dance with me, skin and bones.
So to settle us into this utterly unpredictable mess of debuts that are completely weird on multiple levels for me, let's start off with another week, another no-namer who managed to get a fluke debut here, although in this case at least Shab has some actual momentum behind her. She's a Persian-American singer who's actually built up a decent audience over the last couple of years, and just like a lot of the club play crossover acts before her, she got the backing of Devault for a lot of her singles, and really that doesn't remotely surprise me considering the sound of these. Devault has a habit of picking some of the most random artists to remix, and in this case, considering she's on the rise with a decent following, it doesn't surprise me that she's finally able to chart here on her own. And this song in particular had a pretty weird release window where the remix with Damon Sharp actually came out before the original track was available on streaming platforms, and after hearing the original, honestly, I actually didn't mind this that much. It has the feeling of those deep house-coded European hits that you'd see pop up every now and then and would appear on things like Eurovision. Think of the sort of material that Ukraine or Romania or Bulgaria would release. And honestly, it's a side of the scene that I wish had got a lot more representation in the 2020s because it actually sounds really nice here. The wubs against the smoother percussion line and the legitimate bass that actually builds up really nicely before the drops come in, where Shab's vocal range is admittedly a bit limited and doesn't give me a ton to say, but with this sort of mix and the sharp hookup vibes of the lyrics, it honestly comes together really nicely. It's a very well-paced beat, if anything else. Honestly, if you can factor out the fact that you can very much tell that this was made on a budget, considering the vocal mixing is a little bit cheap and it doesn't have the sort of evolution that you'd really hope for out of this particular sound, yeah, I actually didn't really mind this. For what is basically a lesser known act that's associated with club play, this actually turned out a lot better than I expected. I'll take it. Number 47, Lift Me Up by Diplo and Local Singles featuring Cooke. If you want someone who I can direct a lot more questions towards, okay, seriously, what has Diplo been doing this year? Forever came out last year and had an actual good run, and of course his way of following it up is to revive the major Laser alias despite the fact that nobody wants that alias back. I mean, seriously, they dropped a whole album this year that has some terrible streaming numbers, especially for their standards, and then he works with a bunch of other country artists like Bailey Zimmerman and Priscilla Block, alongside collaborations with Giordani of all things, where honestly, I don't really think anyone else came out looking all that much better from them. They've just not been remotely good either. So just our luck, after the utter flop of Bullets that did next to nothing on this chart, Diplo is back on the Higher Ground label with a song that leans closer to his strongest elements that he's been releasing since 2022. And why not just bring on a new name like Local Singles alongside Cooke, who I'm surprised is actually still here, considering the last time I heard from her was on those Camel Fat collaborations that charted back in 2019, and honestly were really damn good too, mainly because of her voice, and yeah, she's by far the part of this song that really does stand out the most. I mean, she's got the best part of the song with that vocal refrain, even despite her voice being buried back a little bit too far in the mix for my liking. And when you've got that good old school sound with the nice sounding synths, that honestly creates a more unique sound than you'd expect out of Diplo nowadays. It does come together quite well. Problem is that the song doesn't really have any elements that make it drive that extra high mile for me, because this really felt flat after a while. Honestly, kind of reminds me a lot of the songs that were more filler from Hayden James's album Lifted, and while I do like the sound of those tracks quite a bit, I could just return to that album instead of listening to this. It doesn't really hit in the same way that even the filler tracks on that album do. I mean, it's fine. Again, I just don't think that it's really all that special, and considering that Diplo had a period where I was fully on board with him despite all the questionable things he's done over the years, Seeing him go to something like this that feels a lot more phoned in nowadays, unfortunately it doesn't fully hit for me. Not bad by any means, it's decent, but yeah, nothing more than that for me at the moment. Number 45, Call You Back by Layton, Giordani and GENESI featuring Be No Rain.
I got 5 lines in my system.
Another act I'm shocked is actually charting again, although in this case I had much lower expectations, as even though I like GENESI, seeing Layton Giordani on here alongside him, despite the fact that the last song that he charted with, Act of God, was really indicative of Experts Only's collapse in quality this year. Yeah, I didn't really have a ton to really expect here, especially considering that a lot of Experts Only releases outside of John Summit don't really get a ton of push on this format. Hell, John Summit himself has been struggling since Focus to get any sort of crossover, and man, if the ones who do crossover are of this quality, I'm not remotely impressed. In fact, I found this pretty damn bad. Just like Act of God, this feels utterly generic with the sort of atonal, lacking in melody tech house approach that you'd expect out of the filler charting songs on dance sales, not from a name who's getting an actual industry push behind him. This sounds really cheap and underwhelming. But throughout the track, you've got Be No Rain, a soul singer who's actually been delivering some really nice vocal performances based on what I heard on his other collaborations, but here, my god, he is just completely wasted. I mean, he goes for this flat, snarky and exaggerated speaking, sing vocal tone that just does not sound good at all. And when his voice is mixed so far to the front where that's the main element that you can hear, it just leads to a song that gets annoying in record time. And when the production is so mediocre that it doesn't really deliver anything else that's really worth noting besides the bad vocals, yeah, this is a complete dud for me. And yeah, between Act of God and this, I'm not really on board for whatever Layton Giordani charts next, because if it's at this quality, yeah, it's not going to be remotely good. You can skip this. It's not good at all. Number 44, Think About Us by Sonny, Fodera, D.O.D and Poppy Baskcomb. Now, if you want a consistent success story that I like considerably more, honestly, the fact that Sonny Fodera has had so much staying power recently has been really indicative of the quality of his material. Seriously, he's going to go under the radar, but in terms of overall quality, he's been one of the most consistent names that's charted throughout the past year. And seeing him work with D.O.D as he's trying to replicate the success of Some Days, but with a considerably better singer, and also the fact that this song is actually doing decently good numbers worldwide, it gave me a lot to look forward to. And honestly, this might be Sonny Fodera's best charting song to date, or at least seriously up there. This is fantastic. The pluck he sings against a much more sharper percussion style that creates a really unique sound that honestly reminds me a lot of the late 2000s club boom, which especially nowadays with songs like Perfect Exceeder, proves that it's actually holding up really well with age. I'm honestly kind of surprised. And when the drops come in with some even stabbier percussion and some fantastic side chaining, as Poppy Baskcomb just sounds fantastic across this mix, seriously, she flows over this with so much charisma and general presence, and honestly it surprises me that it's taken this long for Poppy Baskcomb to get some sort of massive crossover. She's a really strong vocalist. Yeah, this honestly crossed over really quickly into fantastic territory, and considering how massive it is in the UK and Australia right now, I can actually see this making a run and being a genuine hit just like Some Days, and considering how it's one of, if not the best Sonny Fodera song that's charted in recent memory, I am fully on board with that. This is legitimately excellent, really worth hearing, and I can only hope it crosses over to the main charts soon. And finally, number 40, Never Knew You Albert Harvey mix by D.O.D. To end off this complete clusterfuck week, we ended in the same place where we started, with a name that's even less known than Shab, which is saying something. So for context, the original track is by D.O.D, a 5-piece multi-genre band whose style they've considered electronic jam music, where there's a lot more focus on improvisational elements alongside electronic touches that create a really unique sound that I honestly am surprised has not really crossed over to dance Airplay in the same way. And with this track being on their 2024 album and being a very obvious deep cut with not even 10,000 streams behind it, the fact that someone was actually able to find this and make it into a genuinely credible remix, that's really interesting to note right off the bat. And honestly, the original is really solid, even if the improv structure of the song does lead to it feeling a bit messier than it really should be. But the moment that explodes into a really intense rock section by the end with the vocalist just hollering like he really believes it, it really did click for me then. I do think it's a really good track. So fast forward to now, where this song was actually remixed and in an ironic twist of fate, it's actually doing better than the original, thanks to the producer Albert Harvey, who also happens to have a bigger audience than Two Lots. God, I feel bad for them as a band if that's the case. And to continue with the irony, I actually might like this remix even more than the original. It's got more structure with clear verses and actual flow, and drops that actually go for a much more dance-centric sound that doesn't feel completely messy thanks to the improv style. And when you have those wavering synth effects that really do sound nice over the production here, it honestly came together a lot better than I expected. And while I don't think it's great because the vocals still feel a little bit uncanny and don't really fit into this more modern sounding instrumental, on the original they're given a lot more space to breathe, where this remix doesn't really give them that same privilege. But you know what? I actually am fully on board with this charting. It's a case of a relatively unknown name who's actually delivering some really interesting variety to this chart, and just like Shab, I didn't really mind this at all. It's perfectly fine, maybe even good. And yeah, wow, what an interesting week. Shame it took Mediabase and dance sales to really get us there, but hey, it is what it is. And considering that they're both leading into the best and worst categories this week, I think it's important to note that. I mean, let's just zoom past the two worst songs here, which both get those off of sheer disappointment and a lack of quality, with Call You Back by Layton, Giordani and GENESI featuring Bino Rain easily getting the worst of being a complete annoyance. And coming up, it's Dare by HYPERBEAM aka OMNOM and OMNOM getting the Dishonourable runner-up, because man, that's one of the most disappointing releases I've heard all year, and both artists involved are considerably better than this lazy crap. As for the best, well, the easy best is going to Think About Us by Sonny, Fodera, D.O.D and Poppy Baskcomb. I really hope that song becomes a massive hit across the board. But for Honourable runner-up, it was close in the dance sales section, and I think Without You by SOSA is just barely going to edge out for having a much more driving and interesting sound behind it, and being by far the most memorable of the songs that charted this week, and I really hope it also sticks around. It's great. Next week, well, Haven's looking like he's going to actually rebound and return to the charts in a big way. We'll have to get back to the discussion of that next week if it actually considers itself a debut or a return. But alongside that, we could see even more Fred again charting from USB, and man, I hope that Skrillex actually gets a crossover from that new EP that came out. It's really worth listening to. But yeah, that's all for this episode of an analysis of dance. See you next time.